You know that feeling when something happens that completely changes how you see the world? When reality shifts and you realize everything you thought you knew was just the surface? That happened to me 3 years ago at my grandfather's old hunting cabin in northern Washington state. I woke up to scratching sounds at my door one autumn morning, and what I found on the other side changed everything I believed about what lives in these mountains. 2 small creatures sat huddled on my doorstep, trembling in the cold dawn, covered in frost and looking up at me with huge, dark eyes that held more intelligence than seemed possible. I knew right then that nothing would ever be the same. What makes the story even stranger is that these creatures actually learned to speak, not just mimicking sounds, but truly communicating with me in ways I never expected were possible. By the end of that first incredible week, I became part of something I still don't fully understand. Something that exists in the space between human civilization and the wild places we've pushed to the edges of the map. I inherited my grandfather's cabin when he passed away 3 years ago. He was an old hunter who built the place back in the 70s, tucked away in dense forest where hardly anyone ever goes. The kind of man who valued solitude above almost everything else. He taught me to love the woods when I was a kid, taking me on long hikes and teaching me to identify animal tracks and bird calls. When he left me the cabin in his will, it felt like he was giving me a piece of himself, a refuge from the noise and chaos of modern life. The property sits at the end of a rough logging road that most people wouldn't even attempt without 4-wheel drive. Even with the right vehicle, it feels like a gamble every time. The road winds up the mountainside with steep drop-offs and sections that wash out every spring. My nearest neighbor is about 8 miles away through thick woods, and even they only use their place a few weeks out of the year. It's the kind of isolated spot where you can go weeks without seeing another person, where the only sounds at night are wind in the trees and the occasional call of an owl or coyote. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means I can work from anywhere with decent internet. My clients are scattered across the country, and we communicate mostly by email and video calls. The cabin has solar panels my grandfather installed in his later years, a propane stove that works perfectly, and a wood-burning fireplace for the coldest nights. A few years back, I had satellite internet put in, which meant I could actually live and work remotely without any issues. I had everything I needed. Running water from a well, electricity from the sun, heat from the fireplace, and enough bandwidth to send files to clients and attend virtual meetings. I started spending about half my time out there, especially during spring and fall when the weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, just right for long walks and sitting on the porch with morning coffee. The solitude never bothered me. If anything, I craved it after too much time in the city. There's something about being alone in the woods that clears your head, makes you realize how much of what we worry about in daily life doesn't really matter. Out there, your concerns narrow down to simple things: staying warm, staying fed, enjoying the moment. That particular October, I planned to stay for 3 weeks. I had a big project deadline coming up and wanted to focus without the usual city distractions. No traffic noise, no neighbors playing loud music, no constant buzzing of my phone with messages that could wait. Just me, my laptop, and the quiet of the forest. I loaded up my car with supplies and made the drive on a Friday afternoon. The fall colors were incredible that year. Reds and golds everywhere you looked. The aspens glowing yellow against the dark green of the pines. That drive up the mountain never gets old, no matter how many times I make it. I spent the weekend unpacking, chopping wood for the fireplace, and getting the cabin ready for my extended stay. Swept out the dust that had accumulated since my last visit. Checked that the solar panels were clean and working properly. Made sure the propane tank was full. brought in enough firewood to last a couple weeks. It's a ritual I've come to love. The process of settling in, of transforming the empty cabin back into a home, even if just temporarily. Monday through Wednesday were completely normal, perfect actually. I worked during the day, sitting at the small desk by the window where I could look out at the trees while I waited for files to upload or clients to respond to emails. Took walks in the evening when the light turned golden and the forest seemed to glow. Made simple dinners and enjoyed the peace. The forest was alive with its usual sounds, birds calling back and forth, deer moving through the undergrowth, their hooves crunching on fallen leaves, the wind rustling through the trees, squirrels chattering at each other over territorial disputes. At night, I'd sit by the fire with a book or work on my laptop until I got tired, usually around 10 or 11. Then I'd bank the fire, brush my teeth, and fall asleep to the sound of wind in the pines. It was exactly what I'd hoped for, exactly what I needed. Those first few days, I barely thought about the city at all, barely checked my personal social media. Just existed in the moment. Thursday evening, something changed. I went for my usual walk before dinner and noticed how quiet everything had become. The birds weren't singing like they normally did at that time of day. That pre-dusk chorus that's usually so loud you can barely hear yourself think. It was just silent. I didn't see any deer, which was unusual because they often came around at dusk to graze in the small clearing in front of the cabin. The squirrels were gone too. Even the chipmunks that usually skittered around the woodpile were nowhere to be seen. The forest felt different somehow. Heavier, like the air pressure had changed. I've spent enough time in the woods to know when something's off, and something was definitely off. Animals go quiet like that when there's a predator around, a bear maybe, or a mountain lion. But usually you can sense the source of the tension. This felt more general, more diffuse, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I told myself I was imagining things, being paranoid. But I couldn't shake a slight uneasiness as I headed back to the cabin. I locked the door when I got inside, which I didn't always bother to do out there. Checked the windows, pulled the curtains closed even though there was no one around to see in. Made myself dinner, but couldn't quite enjoy it the way I usually did. Kept pausing to listen. For what, I didn't know. That night, I made dinner and tried to focus on my project, but I kept looking out the windows into the darkness. Everything seemed fine, just the usual night sounds creeping back in, distant owl hoots, wind in the branches, the cabin creaking as it cooled down from the day's warmth. Eventually, I convinced myself I was being silly and went to bed around 11. I fell asleep easily enough, exhausted from a long day of work, but some part of my mind stayed alert, listening. Friday morning, right around dawn, I jolted awake. Strange sounds were coming from right outside my front door, scratching, thumping, soft whimpering noises that made my heart start pounding immediately. The kind of sounds that trigger every primal fear humans carry from our ancient past. My first thought was that a bear was trying to get in. We had them in the area, and I'd seen their scat on the trails. A friend of mine who lived closer to town had even had one tear through his porch looking for food last summer. I lay in bed frozen, listening hard. The scratching continued. Not aggressive exactly, more exploratory. Like whatever was out there was trying to figure out how the door worked. The whimpering was softer, almost crying, which was strange because bears don't really make sounds like that. The thumping came in irregular intervals, something hitting the door, or maybe the wall beside it. The sounds continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. Scratching at the door, shuffling on the wooden porch, the whimpering getting louder and more insistent. Then everything went quiet, complete silence. not even the usual morning bird calls, just nothing. I waited, barely breathing, staring at the ceiling in the pre-dawn darkness, listening so hard my ears hurt. After about 10 minutes of silence, curiosity started to override my fear. Whatever had been out there had stopped. Maybe it had wandered off. Maybe it was just an animal looking for food and had given up when it couldn't get in. I had to know what it was, had to see if it had damaged anything. I couldn't just lie there wondering. I got out of bed as quietly as possible and grabbed the heavy flashlight I kept on my nightstand. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was metal and solid, heavy enough to do some damage if I needed it to. I approached the front door slowly, stepping carefully to avoid the creaky floorboard near the kitchen that always groaned under my weight. I could hear breathing on the other side of the door. Definitely something alive. Multiple somethings, actually. More than one source of breath. My hand shook as I reached for the deadbolt. Part of me screamed not to open it, to wait until full daylight, to call someone for help. But my cell signal was spotty out there, and besides, help was hours away even in an emergency. Whatever was happening, I was on my own. I unlocked the deadbolt carefully, trying to make as little noise as possible. The breathing on the other side paused. Whatever was out there knew I was there too. I cracked the door open just an inch, flashlight ready in my other hand. The pre-dawn light was dim and gray. That eerie hour before sunrise when everything looked strange and colorless. At first, I couldn't see anything unusual on the porch, just the rocking chair my grandfather had built, the small table where I set my coffee in the mornings, the wind chimes hanging from the eave, perfectly still in the windless dawn. I opened the door wider, looking around more carefully. Still nothing immediately visible. The forest beyond the porch was dark and dense. Then I looked down, and my brain just stopped working for a moment. Completely shut down, because what I was seeing didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Two small creatures sat huddled together right at my doorstep. They were maybe 2.5 feet tall, sitting upright like small children, like toddlers almost. But they definitely weren't children. They were covered entirely in fur. One was dark brown, almost black in the dim light. The other was lighter, a reddish-brown color that reminded me of rust. They looked up at me with huge dark eyes that caught the light from my flashlight and reflected it back like an animal's eyes do. My brain tried to process what I was seeing. Baby bears was my first thought, but the faces were all wrong. Too flat, too human-like. Bears have snouts. These creatures had faces that were somehow both ape-like and human-like at the same time. Their arms were long and wrapped around each other in what looked like a hug, like they were holding each other for comfort. They were trembling, shaking so hard I could see it even from several feet away. Whether they were shaking from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. Probably both. Morning frost covered their fur, sparkling slightly in the growing light. Little crystals of ice clinging to the hair on their arms and heads. How long had they been sitting out here? How long had they been scratching at my door, trying to get my attention? Trying to get inside where it was warm? I stepped back instinctively, not sure what to do. Every logical part of my brain screamed at me to shut the door, to call someone. Wildlife control, maybe, or a ranger. But who would I call? What would I even say? There are two creatures on my porch that look like miniature Bigfoot. They'd think I was crazy, or drunk, or both. The creatures didn't move when I stepped back. They just watched me with those big eyes and made soft, whimpering sounds to each other. Despite everything logical screaming at me to shut the door and lock it, I couldn't. These were babies. Whatever they were babies in distress. The temperature had dropped to near freezing overnight. The thermometer on the porch had read 28 degrees when I checked it before bed. They looked half frozen sitting there, covered in frost like little statues. Something in their eyes got to me. Intelligence. Real intelligence. Not just animal instinct, but awareness. They were scared, but they'd come to my door for a reason. They needed help, and somehow they knew that this was where they might find it, that a human might help them, or maybe they were just desperate enough to try anything. Either way, I couldn't leave them out in the cold to freeze. I made a decision that probably wasn't smart, that my friends would have told me was incredibly stupid and dangerous. But in that moment, looking at these small, frightened creatures, I couldn't bring myself to care about smart or safe. I stepped back and opened the door wider, gesturing for them to come in, speaking softly, telling them it was okay. Not sure if they understood words, but hoping the tone would convey safety. They looked at each other when I opened the door wider. I swear they were communicating silently. The darker one tilted its head slightly toward the door. The lighter one hesitated, looking scared. The darker one made a soft sound, almost reassuring. After a long moment, they slowly crawled forward on their hands and feet, moving cautiously across the threshold. Their movements were smooth and coordinated, not quite human, not quite ape, something in between. I closed the door behind them and they stayed near it, pressed against each other, looking around at everything with wide eyes, taking in the cabin, the furniture, the dying embers in the fireplace, me standing there in my pajamas with a flashlight. They looked terrified but also curious, like they'd never seen the inside of a building before, which they probably hadn't. I moved slowly, trying not to startle them with sudden movements, kept my voice soft and steady, talking to them the way you talk to a frightened animal. First thing was to get them warm. They were trembling so hard and I could see their breath fogging in the cold cabin. I went to the fireplace and started building up the fire from last night's embers, added kindling carefully, blew on the coals to get them glowing, added larger pieces of wood once the kindling caught. They watched every movement I made, those big, dark eyes following my hands as I worked. As the fire grew and heat started filling the cabin, they inched closer to it, drawn to the warmth like anyone would be after being out in near-freezing temperatures. I brought blankets from my bedroom, the thick wool ones my grandmother had made years ago, set them on the floor near the fireplace where it was warmest. They touched the blankets tentatively when I set them down, like they'd never felt fabric before, running their fingers over the wool, fascinated by the texture. Then they wrapped themselves up, still huddling together. The darker one pulled the blanket around both of them, making sure its companion was covered too. I sat down several feet away on the couch, just watching them, trying to understand what was happening, trying to make sense of any of this. As the cabin warmed up and more light came through the windows, I could see them better. They were remarkably similar in overall appearance, but clearly distinct individuals. The darker one seemed slightly larger and more alert. It kept looking around, taking everything in, assessing the situation. The lighter one was thinner and seemed weaker somehow. It leaned against its companion more, sought comfort and reassurance through touch. Both had hands that looked eerily human under the fur. 5 fingers with small nails, not claws. The palms looked softer, less hairy. Their thumbs were opposable, capable of gripping and manipulating objects. Their faces showed expressions I could almost read. Curiosity replacing some of the initial fear. Confusion about where they were. Relief at being warm and inside. They kept looking at each other, then at me. Soft sounds passing between them that might have been communication, or might have just been comfort noises. After about half an hour of watching them warm up by the fire, I realized they might be hungry. They'd been out in the cold, probably lost, and who knew when they'd last eaten. Maybe days, They were thin enough that I suspected they hadn't had a proper meal in a while. I went to my kitchen area slowly, talking softly the whole time, narrating what I was doing even though I didn't know if they understood words. Making breakfast, food, something warm. I made oatmeal with honey and heated some canned peaches in a pot on the propane stove. The sweet smell filled the cabin as I cooked. Both creatures lifted their heads when they caught the scent, their nostrils flaring, clearly interested. I poured it into 2 bowls, making sure to get plenty of the syrupy peach juice, added extra honey for calories, brought them over with spoons, though I suspected they wouldn't know what to do with utensils. I set the bowls on the floor near them, moving slowly and carefully. They sniffed the food suspiciously at first, leaning forward to smell it but not touching, unsure if it was safe. To show them it was okay, I made my own bowl and sat on the couch, took a bite and made appreciative sounds, smiled at them. The darker one watched me eat for a moment, then reached out carefully and touched the bowl with one finger. It dipped that finger in the warm oatmeal and brought it to its mouth, tasted it cautiously. Its eyes widened immediately. It made an excited sound to its companion, a high-pitched chirp of discovery. Then both of them started eating with their hands, abandoning the spoons I'd provided, scooping the food up and shoving it in their mouths, getting it all over their faces and hands, not caring about the mess, just hungry and finally able to eat. They ate like they were starving, like they hadn't had food in days, which made sense if they'd been lost. The lighter one ate more slowly than its companion, kept looking around nervously between bites, like it expected something bad to happen. The darker one finished first and looked at me expectantly, holding out its empty bowl. I brought more oatmeal and peaches. It accepted the second helping gratefully. As they ate, I noticed how they interacted with each other. The darker one would push food toward the lighter one, making sure its companion ate enough. When the lighter one slowed down, looking tired, the darker one would make soft, encouraging sounds. Touching its shoulder gently, the lighter one seemed grateful for the attention, making soft sounds back. They were clearly bonded to each other, taking care of each other, looking out for one another the way family members do. After eating, they seemed more comfortable. The food and warmth had helped them relax. They started looking around the cabin with more interest than fear, still moving as a pair, always staying close to each other. They touched things cautiously, the couch cushions, the table leg, my laptop sitting closed on the desk, fascinated by everything but gentle with it all. Not breaking anything or being rough, just exploring their new environment. I followed them at a distance, making sure they didn't hurt themselves or get into anything dangerous. They found my bookshelf after a few minutes of exploration, stood in front of it looking at all the books like they'd never seen anything like it before. The darker one reached up and pulled down a children's picture book I'd had since I was a kid, one of those sturdy board books with bright illustrations, sat down on the floor with it. Its companion immediately sat beside it. They looked through the book together, pointing at pictures, making sounds to each other. The darker one would point and the lighter one would lean in to look closely. They'd exchange sounds, then turn the page, completely absorbed in the simple book. I sat down on the floor near them, moving slowly so I wouldn't startle them. They glanced at me but didn't seem to mind my presence, had already accepted me as safe. I watched them for a minute, then pointed to a picture of an apple in the book. Said the word clearly and slowly, apple. The darker one looked up at me immediately, looked back at the picture, its brow furrowed in what looked like concentration. Then, in a rough, throaty voice, it made a sound. Not quite the word, but close. close enough that I knew it was trying to say apple. I nearly fell over. It had just tried to speak, to mimic human speech. The creature looked pleased with itself when I reacted with surprise, pointed to another picture expectantly, like it wanted to learn more. I pointed to a picture of a tree and said the word carefully. Tree. The lighter one tried this time. Its voice was even rougher than its companions, raspier, but recognizable as an attempt at the word tree. They could mimic human speech, not just random sounds, but actual words. We spent the next hour going through that picture book page by page, me pointing and naming things, them repeating the words back to me. Sometimes it took several tries before they got close to the right sound. Sometimes they got it almost perfectly the first time. They learned fast, frighteningly fast, much faster than any animal should be able to learn. Within an hour, they knew about 20 words, simple concrete things: food, water, tree, bird, fire, warm, cold, house, door, window. They would practice with each other between new words, repeating them back and forth, sometimes correcting each other's pronunciation. The darker one was better at making the sounds clearly. Its voice came out stronger and more controlled. The lighter one was better at remembering which word meant what, had a better memory even if the sounds didn't come out as clean. They worked as a team naturally, teaching each other, helping each other. When one struggled with a word, the other would demonstrate it. When one forgot what something was called, the other would remind it. It was remarkable to watch, like watching children learn language, except these weren't children. These were creatures that shouldn't exist according to modern science. And they were learning human language in real time right in front of me. I realized something profound as we went through that book together. These weren't just intelligent animals operating on instinct. These were thinking, reasoning beings with the capacity for language, with the ability to learn and remember and communicate abstract concepts. They understood that the picture of an apple represented all apples, not just that specific image. They grasped that words were symbols for things in the world. That's not something simple mimicry can accomplish. That requires actual cognitive understanding. By lunchtime, they seemed completely comfortable with me. They would follow me around the cabin as I moved from room to room, sit near me when I sat down. The lighter one especially seemed to seek comfort from my presence, would lean against my leg when we sat together. The darker one was more independent, maintaining a bit more distance, but still attentive, still watching everything I did and learning from it. I found myself talking to them constantly, explaining what I was doing as I moved around the cabin. Look, I'm making lunch. This is bread. This is cheese. We're going to make sandwiches. They listened intently to everything, learning new words with each explanation. By afternoon, they'd probably picked up 50 or 60 words, not all of them clearly, but enough that we could start to communicate basic ideas. After lunch, I had work to do. Client deadlines don't care if you've just discovered that Bigfoot is real and living in your cabin. I sat at my desk trying to focus on the design project I'd come up here to finish. But the two creatures were fascinated by my laptop. They stood behind my chair watching the screen intently as I worked. Every movement of the cursor captured their attention. Every image that appeared made them chirp with excitement. I pulled up some pictures of animals to show them since work wasn't happening anyway. They got excited immediately. Pointing at the screen, making sounds, I showed them pictures of bears and deer and birds. They would point and try to name what they were seeing using the words they'd learned. Tree, bird, big. When I showed them a picture of a gorilla, something changed. The darker one stared at the image for a long time, made a sound I hadn't heard before, something deeper and more resonant. Then it touched its own chest and said what might have been a word in their language, then pointed at the gorilla picture. It was identifying itself with the ape family, recognizing the similarity. It had enough self-awareness to look at an image of another primate and understand that they were related, that they shared something fundamental. The weather warmed up in the afternoon as the sun climbed higher. It was one of those perfect October days, cool enough to be comfortable, but warm enough to be outside without a jacket. I decided to take them out to play. They seemed to have too much energy to stay cooped up inside anyway. They seemed nervous at first when I opened the door, held hands with each other, looked at me uncertainly. But once I stepped out onto the porch, they followed. Once out in the sunshine, they came alive in a way they hadn't inside. Ran around the clearing in front of the cabin with incredible speed and agility. Climbed trees like it was the easiest thing in the world. Scaling trunks that I couldn't have climbed with a ladder. They played what looked like tag with each other. One would chase the other around the clearing, then reverse roles. They would laugh while they played, actual laughing sounds, high-pitched and joyful. Call to each other using the words they had learned. Come, here, tree, fast. I sat on the porch steps watching them play, smiling despite the absolute strangeness of the situation. They were so clearly just kids, just children playing. It didn't matter that they were covered in fur or that they could climb 40 feet up a tree in seconds. They were babies having fun, being silly, enjoying themselves in the sunshine. The lighter one climbed higher than it should have in one of the tall pines at the edge of the clearing. I saw it happen and started to stand up, to call out a warning. But before I could, it lost its grip. Fell about 8 feet straight down onto the ground, hit hard enough that I heard the impact from across the clearing. It cried out in pain, a sound that was heartbreaking in its fear and hurt. The darker one rushed to its companion immediately, faster than I could move even though I was running. It was making distress sounds, high-pitched chirps of worry. I reached them seconds later and knelt down beside the lighter one. It was holding its arm and crying. Real tears running down its face. The darker one was touching it gently all over, checking for injuries, making soothing sounds. I carefully examined the injured arm, moving it gently to check the range of motion. The lighter one whimpered but let me manipulate it, trusting me even though it hurt. Nothing seemed broken. The arm bent and straightened normally, but there was already swelling starting and the whole area would be badly bruised. I said softly, repeatedly, that it was hurt. Hurt. The darker one looked at me with those big eyes and repeated the word, hurt. Understanding what I meant, I brought them both inside. The play session was over, got ice from my small freezer and wrapped it in a dish towel, showed them how to hold it on the injury to reduce swelling. The darker one took the ice pack from me and held it carefully on its companion's arm. Wouldn't leave its side. They curled up together under blankets near the fireplace, exhausted from the day, the injury, the emotional toll of everything. I made dinner for all three of us, more substantial than breakfast, pasta with sauce, bread with butter, some vegetables. They ate mechanically, too tired to be excited about food anymore. After dinner, I started to walk to my bedroom to get ready for sleep. But the darker one called out, just one word but clear as day, stay. I turned back, surprised. Both were looking at me with those big eyes, not wanting to be alone. I brought more blankets and made myself a spot on the couch near the fireplace where they'd settled. They relaxed once I was close. The darker one made a soft sound that might have been thank you in their language. They settled down to sleep, curled against each other, the lighter one still favoring its hurt arm but seeming comfortable enough. I lay on the couch listening to them breathe, wondering what I'd gotten myself into, wondering what would happen next. Around midnight, I woke to sounds outside, heavy footsteps circling the cabin, much heavier than the babies, something massive moving through the darkness. The kind of footsteps that make the porch boards creak even from outside. I sat up quietly, heart immediately pounding. The two creatures were awake too, sitting up under their blankets, trembling. Pressed so closely against each other, they looked like one shape in the dim light from the dying fire. The darker one whispered a word, just one word, but I understood it immediately, even though it was in their language. The tone, the context, the way it said it. Mother. My blood ran cold. Something massive was outside looking for these babies. I could hear it moving around the cabin, sniffing at the walls, testing. The babies made soft crying sounds, fear and longing mixed together, wanting their mother but scared of the situation. I moved closer to them without thinking, protective instinct kicking in, even though there was nothing I could actually do against whatever was out there. The footsteps moved slowly, methodically, circling the entire cabin, stopping at each window, at the door. Something pushed against the door. Not hard, just testing it, seeing if it would open. The door held. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the footsteps moved away. Retreated slowly back into the forest, the sound fading gradually until it was gone. The babies slowly relaxed, but they didn't go back to sleep, just sat there under their blankets, wide-eyed and quiet. Neither did I. We all stayed awake until dawn, listening to every sound the forest made, waiting to see if she would come back. Morning came slowly, the sky gradually lightening from black to gray to pale blue. I woke from a doze I hadn't realized I'd fallen into to find the babies already awake, standing at the window looking out into the forest. Not scared now, just watchful, I joined them. The forest looked normal, peaceful, nothing moving out there but a few early birds. But something had changed. The darker one turned to me, said that word again, the one from last night, mother, then added another word they'd learned, coming. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Their mother was coming, was out there right now, probably had been out there all night. I asked if they wanted to go to their mother. They looked at each other. Something passed between them, some silent communication. The lighter one shook its head slowly, said softly, with words I'd taught them, "Stay here, safe." I understood what they meant. They felt safer with me in this cabin than out there with whatever was searching for them, which broke my heart a little. But their mother was looking for them. She was clearly enormous and possibly dangerous, but she was their mother. They needed to get back to her. They couldn't stay here forever. Eventually, I'd have to leave, or someone would come check on me. This couldn't last. I made breakfast while thinking about what to do, made it automatic and distracted. The babies ate quietly, less enthusiastically than yesterday. They knew something was happening. Could sense the change in the situation. After we ate, I gathered supplies, water bottles, snacks, first aid kit, anything I might need if we went out into the forest. The babies watched with interest. When I picked up my jacket from the hook by the door, they got excited. Thought we were just going out to play again. We went outside together. The morning air was crisp and cold, but clear. Beautiful. The babies were happy and energetic despite everything. Running ahead a little, then back to me, then ahead again, playing their games, but I had a purpose. I started walking slowly toward the forest, looking for signs of whatever had been circling the cabin last night, looking for tracks, broken branches, anything that would tell me where the mother had gone. About a quarter mile from the cabin, we found something that made my heart stop. A tree with large scratch marks high up on the trunk, way higher than a bear could reach, Even standing on its hind legs, a bear couldn't make marks that high. These were at least 10 feet up, made by something with incredible reach and strength. Below the marked tree, a pile of rocks had been arranged deliberately, stacked in a small cairn, a marker of some kind. The babies stopped playing when they saw the tree and the rocks, became very quiet. The darker one approached the tree slowly, almost reverently, touched the scratch marks with one small hand, said softly a word in their language that I understood from context meant home. We'd found signs of their territory, their families marking, the place that belonged to them. I expected them to be excited, to want to call out for their mother right away, to rush off into the forest looking for her. Instead, they both seemed conflicted, held hands with each other tightly, looked back in the direction of my cabin, barely visible through the trees, then at the tree marker, then at each other. The lighter one started crying, real tears running down its face. The darker one tried to comfort it, but seemed upset too. They didn't want to leave. I knelt down between them so I was at their eye level, spoke as softly and gently as I could, told them their mother loved them, that she was looking for them, that she was worried. The darker one looked at me with those big dark eyes and asked in its rough voice if I was their mother. My heart broke completely. I shook my head, said no, but that I was their friend, that their mother was out there waiting for them. They both looked at me with such trust, such innocent faith in what I was telling them. The lighter one touched my face gently with its small hand, asked in a whisper if we were friends, if we would stay friends. I promised we would always be friends, no matter what happened. That seemed to help them feel better, seemed to give them the courage they needed. I told them to call for their mother, to let her know where they were. They looked nervous but nodded, understanding what needed to happen. The darker one stood up straight and made a loud calling sound, high-pitched and carrying, a cry that echoed through the forest. We waited in silence. Nothing. The darker one called again, louder this time. The lighter one joined in on the second call, their voices harmonizing in a way that was almost musical. We waited in the clearing by the marked tree. Minutes passed with no response, just the normal sounds of the forest. Birds, wind. The babies were about to call again when we heard it, distant but unmistakable, a much deeper call in response, lower pitched, more powerful. It resonated through the trees like thunder, the mother answering her babies. We heard something moving through the forest toward us, heavy footsteps, purposeful, crashing through underbrush that would have stopped a person. The babies pressed against my legs, not running to meet their mother despite calling her, still nervous about what was coming. I felt real fear rise in my throat, but pushed it down. Had to be strong for them, had to show them there was nothing to be afraid of. The crashing got closer, louder. I could see trees and bushes moving as something large pushed through the dense forest, branches breaking, undergrowth being trampled. Then the forest fell silent for a moment. Everything went still. And then she emerged from the tree line into our little clearing. An enormous figure, at least 7.5 feet tall, maybe 8, massive shoulders twice as wide as mine, arms as thick as my torso hanging down past her knees, covered completely in dark reddish-brown fur that caught the morning sunlight. Female, clearly, from her build and the way she moved. The mother. She stopped at the edge of the clearing about 30 feet away, looked at her babies with an expression I couldn't quite read, then looked at me. And the intelligence in those eyes was shocking, absolutely shocking. Ancient wisdom and awareness looking out at me. The babies called out when they saw her, soft sounds, longing mixed with uncertainty. But they didn't move, didn't run to her, stayed pressed against my legs, torn between safety with me and the pull of their mother. Several long moments passed in silence, the mother examining the scene in front of her, her babies clinging to this human woman. Me standing my ground, one hand on each of their shoulders, protective. The mother took one slow step forward. My every instinct screamed to back away, to run. This thing could tear me apart without effort. But I held still. The babies needed to see I wasn't afraid, needed to feel safe in this moment. She took another step, now about 20 feet away, close enough that I could see details. The silver mixed into the fur on her face, the scars on her arms from old injuries, the way her breath fogged in the cold morning air. Another step, 15 feet now, I could smell her, musky and earthy like the forest after rain. Not unpleasant, just wild. She stopped there and her eyes never left mine during that entire slow approach, like she was reading me, trying to understand who I was and why I had her babies. Another step, 10 feet, close enough to reach me in one lunge if she wanted to, close enough to kill me before I could even think about running. The mother made a sound then, deep and rumbling like distant thunder. It came from deep in her chest. The babies responded with softer sounds, some kind of exchange happening that I couldn't understand. Then the mother spoke, actually spoke in English. Her voice was incredibly deep, rough, each word clearly difficult to form, but unmistakable. She said 2 words, "Thank you." My mind reeled. The mother could speak English, not well, but she could speak it, which meant she'd been exposed to humans before, had listened and learned, had probably been near the cabin during the time the babies were with me, listening to me teach them, learning alongside them. She continued in simple, broken phrases, told me they were lost, that there had been a storm, that she'd been searching. The words came slowly, carefully, but the meaning was clear. I found my voice finally, told her the babies were safe, that they were good, that I'd tried to take care of them. My voice shook, but I got the words out. She nodded slowly, a very human gesture. Then she moved closer, just a few more feet, close enough to touch now. The babies finally left my side and went to her. She gathered them in her enormous arms, held them close, checked them over the way any mother would, running her hands over them, looking for injuries, making sure they were truly okay. She found the injury on the lighter one's arm. The swelling had gone down, but there was still bruising visible through the fur. She looked at me with concern, clear worry in those ancient eyes. I explained as simply as I could. Tree fell hurt, not broken. She examined the arm carefully, bent it gently, seemed satisfied that it would heal, made soothing sounds to the lighter baby who was whimpering slightly at the attention to its sore arm. She set down the darker baby but kept holding the lighter one, looked at it with an expression that transcended species. Pure maternal love and worry. I noticed something then that I hadn't fully registered before. The lighter baby was very thin under its fur. You could see ribs if you looked closely. It wasn't just smaller than its sibling, it was genuinely underweight, unhealthy. The mother spoke again, simple words, said the baby was sick, had been sick a long time, touched its chest over its heart. I understood immediately. Something was wrong internally with the lighter baby, some kind of chronic illness or condition. That explained why it was weaker, why it tired more easily, why it sought comfort more than its more independent sibling. This baby was struggling to survive. The mother looked at me for a long moment, held that eye contact. Then she did something I never expected. She held out the lighter baby toward me, offering it. I was completely confused, didn't understand what she wanted. She spoke again, said I had helped before, gestured to the hurt arm, said something about medicine, about humans. She wanted my help. She was asking me, a human, to help save her sick baby. The weight of that request hit me like a physical blow. My mind raced trying to understand what she was asking. This baby needed real medical help, professional help. But how could I possibly explain any of this? Walk into a hospital emergency room with a baby Bigfoot, I'd be arrested immediately. The baby would be taken, locked up somewhere, studied, experimented on. The government would get involved, the military maybe. This baby would spend the rest of its life in a cage being poked and prodded. But the alternative was leaving it to die. And I couldn't do that. Couldn't look into those big, dark eyes and turn away. The mother watched me, waiting for an answer. The two babies watched me. The darker one spoke then, just one word in English, a word I'd taught it, please. That single word spoken in that rough little voice decided everything. I told the mother I would try, that I didn't know if I could help, but I would try. She seemed to understand. Gently set the lighter baby down on the ground. Both babies came to me immediately. The darker one took my hand in its small, furry hand, held on tight. I asked the mother what exactly was wrong. She touched her own chest, made gestures trying to explain, fast, then slow, pointing to her heart. Some kind of arrhythmia, irregular heartbeat, something serious but potentially treatable if I could figure out how. The mother picked up both babies then, preparing to take them back into the forest with her. The babies reached toward me, called out that I was their friend, used the words I'd taught them. Friend, stay, come back. I promised I would come back, would bring help, would find a way. The mother gave me one more long look, something like gratitude in those ancient, intelligent eyes, an understanding passing between two mothers trying to protect children. Then she turned and walked back into the forest, the babies waving over her massive shoulder until the trees swallowed them up completely. The walk back to the cabin felt like a dream. My mind was completely overwhelmed trying to process everything that had just happened. I'd met an adult Bigfoot, had a conversation with her in broken English, promised to help save her dying baby. The enormity of it was crushing. How do you even begin to solve a problem like this? I couldn't tell anyone the truth, but I couldn't let that baby die either. Back at the cabin, I got on my laptop immediately, started researching heart conditions, treatments, medications, what might cause arrhythmia in primates. I spent hours reading medical journals and veterinary papers, compiling notes, making lists. The lighter baby probably had some kind of congenital heart defect, something it was born with. Beta blockers might help regulate the heartbeat, maybe other medications depending on the specific problem. But how do you get prescription medication for a creature that doesn't exist? I couldn't write a prescription, couldn't explain to a doctor what I needed. Then I remembered my friend from college. She'd been studying to be a pharmacist when we'd last talked. We'd stayed in touch through social media and occasional messages. Maybe she could point me in the right direction without me having to explain the real situation. I called her that afternoon, made up a story about doing research for a novel I was writing, said I had a character who worked at an animal sanctuary and needed to treat a gorilla with heart problems. What medications might they use? How would they get them? She was happy to help, loved talking about her field. She told me all about different options for treating arrhythmia, then mentioned something crucial. Large animal veterinary clinics sometimes stock similar medications for treating horses and other big animals with heart conditions. That was my answer, a vet clinic. Early the next morning, before I could second-guess myself, I drove the 2 hours to the nearest sizable town, found a veterinary clinic that specialized in large animals, horses mostly, but also cattle and exotic animals. I walked in with a rehearsed story, said I worked with a private animal rescue, that we had a rescued primate with developing heart issues. that our regular vet was out of town and we needed something to tide the animal over until he returned. The veterinarian who saw me was skeptical at first, asked a lot of questions, but I laid on the desperation, explained that this animal would die without help, that I'd driven hours to find someone who could provide the medication we needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of questioning, he agreed. Gave me a small supply of medication with strict written instructions on dosing by weight. Told me to have our regular vet call him. I paid in cash so there would be no paper trail, no record of my name. Got out of there before he could ask more questions. While in town, I stopped at other stores, bought high-calorie nutrition shakes, vitamins, first aid supplies, bought more children's books thinking of the babies, bought fruit and crackers and granola bars and anything else that might be useful. Spent nearly every dollar I had with me. Didn't care about the cost. Drove back to the cabin by early afternoon with my car full of supplies and my head full of worry about whether any of this would actually work. That evening, I went back to the clearing where we'd met the mother, brought everything in my backpack, the medication carefully wrapped and protected, the written instructions, all the supplies. My heart was pounding as I walked through the forest, hoping they would be there, hoping they would come. I reached the clearing just as the sun was starting to set. Golden light slanting through the trees. They were already there waiting, the mother sitting calmly with both babies beside her. The babies saw me first and got excited. Started to run toward me, but their mother stopped them with a sound. Made them wait. She stood up to her full, intimidating height and watched me approach. Only when I was a few feet away did she let the babies come to me. They rushed forward, calling me friend, wrapping their small arms around my legs. I hugged them back, feeling the warmth of their small bodies through the fur. The lighter baby looked even weaker than yesterday, more tired, less energy. I could see it in the way it moved, the way it leaned against its sibling for support. Whatever was wrong was getting worse. We didn't have much time. I explained everything to the mother as simply as I could, showed her the medication, demonstrated how to crush it and mix it with food or water, explained the dosing carefully using both words and gestures. How much, how often, signs to watch for that meant it was working or that there was a problem. She watched everything intently, learning, memorizing. Her intelligence was staggering when you really paid attention. She understood complex concepts immediately, grasped cause and effect, understood that too much medicine was dangerous, but too little wouldn't help. I gave the first dose to the lighter baby right there, mixed the crushed pill into some mashed banana I'd brought. The baby ate it without complaint. The darker baby wanted some too, jealous of the attention and the treat. I gave them both fruit, making it fair, making sure neither felt left out. We spent over an hour together as darkness fell, me teaching the mother everything she needed to know, how to recognize if the baby was getting better, what signs meant danger, when to give more medicine and when to wait. I'd left detailed written instructions even though I wasn't sure if she could read human writing. She took them carefully, folded them and tucked them away somewhere in her fur, treated them like precious objects. As night settled in completely, we all sat together in that clearing. I brought out all the food I'd packed, sandwiches and crackers and fruit and cookies. We shared it all under the emerging stars. The babies were delighted with the cookies especially. The darker one kept saying over and over that they were good. The mother ate slowly and carefully, watching her babies eat, watching me. There was such peace in that moment despite everything. Unlikely beings from different worlds sharing a simple meal. I met them every evening for the next week, sometimes at the clearing, sometimes they came near the cabin. Each meeting, I brought more supplies, more food, more educational things for the babies. And each time, the lighter baby looked a little better, more energy, better color in its face, brighter eyes. The medicine was working. Whatever heart condition it had was responding to treatment. The relief I felt was overwhelming. The darker baby continued learning at an incredible pace. By the end of that week, it knew over 100 words, could form simple sentences. The lighter one learned more slowly, but was trying so hard. Both of them would practice with each other when I wasn't around. I could tell because they'd use new words correctly that I'd only taught them once or twice. The mother watched their progress with what looked like pride. The mother began to relax more around me as the week went on, would sit closer during our evening meetings, started asking questions about human life in her broken English. She was fascinated by the idea of cities, of thousands of people living together. I showed them pictures on my phone of buildings and cars and crowds. The mother looked sad when she saw the photos, said there were many humans now that her kind had to hide, had to stay away from all the places humans had taken. I understood what she meant. They were refugees in their own forest, their world shrinking as ours expanded. One evening near the end of that week, the mother seemed agitated, kept looking into the forest, kept sniffing the air. Finally, she told me that other humans were coming. I didn't understand at first. Then she explained using simple words and gestures. Hunters, with guns, boomsticks that killed. I felt a chill run down my spine. Hunting season was about to start. These creatures were in danger every fall when hunters flooded into the mountains. Any one of them could be shot on sight. The mother said they would leave soon, would go deep into the mountains where hunters rarely went. We agreed to meet one last time before they left for the deep mountains. I brought special treats, better food than I've been bringing, warmer clothes that I thought might fit the babies, things that could help them survive a harsh winter in the high country. I also brought my camera, asked the mother's permission before I took any photos. She considered for a long moment, then nodded, understanding somehow that I wanted to remember. I took photos of all three of them together, the babies playing, the mother watching over them. Photos I would never show another soul, but that I needed for myself. Proof that this had really happened, that I hadn't imagined it all. The babies were fascinated by the camera, wanted to see the pictures on the screen, pointed at themselves in the images and laughed. The mother had brought something for me too. A small carved figure she'd made using tools or sharp rocks, crude but clearly recognizable as a human figure. As me specifically, she said to remember her, to remember them. I was so moved I could barely speak, just nodded and held that little carving carefully. The babies each gave me something too. The darker one gave me a perfect bird feather it had found, bright blue and pristine. The lighter one gave me a smooth river, stone-shaped vaguely like a heart. I accepted both gifts with tears running down my face. I promised to come back in the spring, would bring more medicine, more books, more supplies. The mother said they would wait, would come back when the snow melted and the hunters left. Spring was their word now, a concept of time they'd learned from me. The lighter baby, so much healthier now, said quietly that I was their friend. Not a question. A statement of fact, something true and permanent. When it was time to go, we walked together to the edge of the clearing. The babies hugged me one final time, small arms wrapping around my waist. The mother placed one massive hand on top of my head, heavy but gentle, a blessing or a thank you or just a gesture of connection. Then they turned and walked into the darkness together. The babies kept turning back to wave, using the gesture I'd taught them, until finally the forest swallowed them completely and they were gone. I stayed at the cabin another week after they left. Finished my project finally, took long walks in the forest hoping to catch a glimpse of them. Never did, but sometimes I found small signs that they were still around. A stacked pile of rocks I didn't remember being there, a feather placed carefully on my porch railing. Little messages saying they were watching over me the way I'd watched over them. Eventually, I had to return to the city. Had other work commitments I couldn't avoid. Had bills to pay and a life to get back to. I packed up carefully, took my mementos with me, the carved figure, the feather, the stone, set them on my desk at home where I could see them every day, started researching habitat preservation and wilderness protection, found ways to donate to environmental causes without explaining why I suddenly cared so much about protecting remote forests. Winter passed slowly. I thought about them constantly, hoped they were safe in the high mountains, hoped the medicine had worked, hoped the lighter baby was thriving now instead of just surviving. Counted down the days until spring when the snow would melt and I could return to the cabin. As soon as the mountain roads cleared in April, I packed everything I thought they might need and drove back up. Arrived on a beautiful clear day with wildflowers just starting to bloom in the meadows. Set up for a long stay this time. That first evening I walked to our clearing and called out the way the mother had taught me. A specific series of sounds that meant friend and safe. Waited, nothing. Tried again the next evening, and the next. A week passed with no sign of them. I started to worry seriously. Had something happened during the winter? Had the medicine stopped working? Had hunters found them despite their caution? I left food at the clearing every evening. It was always gone by morning, but I never saw who took it. Could have been regular animals. Could have been them watching from hiding. I didn't know. 2 weeks after I arrived, I woke one morning to familiar sounds on my porch. Soft scratching, quiet whimpering. My heart leaped. I rushed to the door and opened it carefully. There they were, the mother and both babies. But they'd grown over the winter. The babies were bigger now, nearly 3 feet tall, the lighter one looking completely healthy, strong and energetic, no longer that weak, struggling baby from last fall. The medicine had worked, had truly worked. The babies rushed to me when they saw me. They created a name for me in their language over the winter, a combination of sounds that meant something like friend who helps. They said it over and over as they hugged me. I hugged them back, marveling at how much they'd grown, how strong they felt now. They were still children, but growing fast, becoming juveniles. The lighter one said very clearly in English that I was their friend. The darker one echoed it enthusiastically. That was 3 years ago. I've continued visiting the cabin regularly since then, spend months there when I can manage it. They meet me often when I'm there. The babies are juveniles now, nearly 4 feet tall and growing stronger every day, smart as any human child their age. We communicate in a hybrid of their language and mine. They've taught me their words, and I've taught them mine until we've created something new, a language that belongs only to us. The mother trusts me completely now, has shown me things I never expected to see. Their hidden valley deeper in the mountains where they retreat during hunting season, the caves where they shelter during the worst winter storms, the places where special plants grow that they use for medicine. She's told me about their history, their fears, their hopes for survival in a world that's increasingly hostile to their existence. I've become part of their small family in a way I never imagined possible, and they've become part of mine. It's an impossible relationship, one that exists in the space between human civilization and true wilderness. A secret I keep locked away from everyone I know because some things are too precious to risk, some connections too important to expose to a world that wouldn't understand. Sometimes I think about going public, about proving their existence to the world, showing the photos I've taken, sharing the incredible story of these intelligent beings living hidden in our forests. But then I remember the mother's words about danger from humans. Remember the trust in those big, dark eyes. Remember how the lighter baby's life was saved because I could move between both worlds without bringing attention. Could get medicine they desperately needed while keeping their existence secret. So I keep the secret, guard it fiercely, because some truths are more important than proof. Some relationships matter more than validation. I know what I found on my doorstep that cold October morning. 2 small, frightened creatures who changed everything I thought I knew about the world, who taught me that intelligence and emotion and love take many forms. That family can form in the most unexpected ways. That friendship transcends species when hearts are truly open. They're out there right now as I write this, growing, learning, living their hidden lives in the deep forest where humans rarely venture. The babies are juveniles now, nearly ready to become adults themselves. The lighter one, once so weak and struggling, is now strong and healthy. A living testament to what can happen when 2 worlds meet with compassion instead of fear. When spring comes again next month, I'll return to the cabin, walk through the forest to our clearing, call out in the language we've created together, and they'll emerge from the trees, the young ones grown taller, the mother strong and watchful, as always. They'll greet me with sounds and gestures that mean friend and family. And for a little while, our 2 worlds will touch again in that magical space where humans and Bigfoot meet. Not as predator and prey, not as scientist and subject, but as equals, as family, as friends who've chosen each other across every boundary that should have kept us apart. For more interesting stories, check this out.